Hi, welcome to Spirit in the Shed, your one-stop shop for scriptural sensibility. I'm your host, Chris.
And I'm Marcy. So this is our first live episode. We hope you enjoy it. We're going to recap episode 3, which was about Cain and Abel.
Cain and Abel. Man, that was such a depressing story. But
It really was.
It had a hint of what's going to happen next and a hint of hope in there as well.
Just a little hint. So, as you know from the episode, that Cain and Abel were brothers. They were the sons of Adam and Eve. And Cain and Abel went to make their sacrifices to God, and Abel's was taken and Cain's was not, and it made Cain a little upset. So Cain killed his brother. That's the quick overview of the last episode. You can find us and listen to that in whole if you have not heard the episode yet. So then we went through big genealogy, and we landed on a man named Noah.
Man named Noah. And this man named Noah is going to be coming up a little bit, but after the fact, God is talking strictly about the entire world.
Right.
So we're going to get to Noah here in a second, but I want to talk about this period between the genealogy and the call of Noah. It talks about how the sons of God came down and mated with the humans.
Right.
And this is actually a reference to an extra biblical source called the First Book of Enoch. It's part of Jewish tradition that the Satan came down and rebelled against God, and him and his angels were banished away. I was reading a commentary by David Guzik, who was saying that when Adam and Eve out of the garden and that whole rebellion was still going on, that Satan, the serpent, was not too happy that God was planning on saving the entire world from his mess that he created.
I can imagine.
And so he hatched this plan to make sure the woman's seed never sprouts the Messiah by planting a seed of evil throughout all of humanity. And he did that by mating with the humans, essentially making the Messiah, this place, uninhabitable for the Messiah.
Okay.
And so that's what the whole mating process was all really about. And it's showing that the humans were becoming so corrupt from this planting of a seed by the Satan throughout all the world that the only person who was still righteous in God's eyes was Noah. Right. And it gives you an interesting point because in this passage it says God chose to strive for them.
Right.
And the word strive here in Hebrew, and I'm sorry, I'm talking your ear off for a second.
Go ahead.
But the word strive in Hebrew relates to judge by pleading the cause of.
Right.
So you're seeing a confliction in God himself right now. He wants to plead the cause of these human beings, but he knows that in order to bring about the Messiah and his plan, he has to do something about these people.
Right. And from the beginning of time, God has always known that he was going to have known.
God has always known.
And he still, like you said, he still chose. He chose the human race, no matter what.
He knew the end from the beginning. He knew the end would be greater than what was going on here.
Exactly. And so, because of this seed, and even today, there are so many seeds being planted by Satan that the corruption is still there. And we are still being called by God. We still have to choose. We have to choose. And God still was pleading our case. So it's not much further from then to now, the corruption that is in the world.
It's still going on. And it gives us an important point. You know, one of the things that I loved hearing about is that no matter how far you get away from God, no matter how many steps you walk away from him, it just takes one step to get back to him.
That's exactly right. Now let's talk about this man named Noah. God said that my spirit will not put up with humans for such a long time. So he limited their age, right?
Yeah.
And down through this passage, we're in chapter 6, in case you want to look at it. Down through this passage, or it talks about the evil. It says the Lord was sorry he'd ever made them, talking about humans, and put them on the earth. It broke his heart. So our behavior, by our I mean the entire human race, the behavior of humans broke the heart of God. That gets to me.
And even though he knew it was going to happen, it still broke his heart.
Exactly.
It shows that this is not just a God who's just like out there and just like a standard, like a machine and stuff like that, that has feelings.
Right.
And even though he knew the end from the beginning, he didn't like the fact that that process was still happening. There was still that portion that was feeling sorry for everything.
Yes. It's like being a parent and your kid does something that you've told them time and time again not to do, and they continue to do it anyway.
They just
and
continue
it breaks
to do it.
your heart, but you still don't want to have to discipline them for it, you know? So it's kind of, that's the image I get at this point. But down at the end of this first paragraph, it says, I'm sorry I ever made them. But this man, he was a very righteous man. Like, he strove to fulfill God's will in his life. He strove to do whatever God wanted him to do.
And that's amazing, you know? Because even though God was like in this entire generation, that was like, it was an evil and corrupt generation,
Mm-hmm.
he still found someone in that corrupt generation who is just talked about as being just blameless, even though he wasn't like perfect.
Right.
He still strove to complete and to save this one family that didn't deserve it.
So God spoke to Noah, spoke to his heart. He may have had an audible voice at that time. I don't know. But he spoke to Noah and he said, I've decided that I'm going to destroy the human race with a flood. So, this is your point, Noah. This is what you're supposed to do. Build a boat. But what's a boat?
What's a boat? What's rain?
Right. Because he said it's going to rain, and it had not rained at that point from the sky. All the water had come up from the ground at that point, right?
Yeah, that's what it says.
That's what it says. Mm-hmm. So he tells Noah to build a large boat from cypress wood and waterproof it with tar inside and out. And the first time I ever read that passage, the thing that struck me was he calls us to do the same thing with our hearts. You know, he says up in Proverbs, guard your heart, for it's a wellspring of life. And this boat was going to preserve life on the earth. He said to seal it with pitch, to make it waterproof, to make it buoyant, to make it float, to get through the trouble that's coming. And that's what God calls us to do so often.
He calls us to seal our hearts from the outside so that it cannot be destroyed from anything outside of us. But he also says seal it from the inside so that our hearts can't destroy us. Because as it says in the book of Jeremiah, our heart is deceitful and wicked above all things. But it's also the wellspring of life.
Right.
So
right.
It's just amazing that you would talk about that, because it's just like...
So God gives him all the dimensions of the boat, and that's found in verses 14 through 16, if you want to read that. He says, I'm about to cover the earth with a flood that will destroy every living thing that breathes. Everything on the earth will die. Then he says, but. Now, I think I mentioned in one of our very first episodes that the word but is a conjunction, and it actually will negate anything that you say before it. So like if you say, I love ham and eggs, but I have ham and eggs, you love ham and eggs with syrup on them. Right? So you just negated everything you just said.
I love salad, but I have to have like a gallon of ranch on it.
So that's about right. So he says, I'm going to destroy everything on the earth, but I'll confirm my covenant with you. Period.
And this is the covenant that he created with Adam and Eve from the very beginning, to bless them and to make sure they were fruitful and multiply. And we're not only seeing this covenant carrying on from them, it's being added on to. More and more what his plan is as this covenant is being carried on from person to person.
Wow. I love that it's being added to. The way that you said it, it's being carried on and it's being added to, that really or added to that really got me for
Did that
just a
blow your
second.
mind?
Yeah, it did. Like in a bunch of places. So then God gave Noah the instructions to bring a pair of every kind of animal. This is the part of the story. All the animals came 2 by 2 and got on the boat, and Noah saved everything that was breathing. He saved everything that God told him to save, including mosquitoes and flies. Can you believe that?
That is incredible.
That's horrible.
That is horrible. I wish he hadn't saved the mosquitoes and the flies, honestly. I would rather not.
But he didn't ask us, so you know. And then at the bottom of that passage in verse 22, it says, "So Noah did everything exactly as God commanded him." And not many of us can get to the point where the flood comes. And this is one of my favorite parts about the story of Noah. It says, "When everything was ready, the Lord said to Noah, 'Go into the boat.' And when the rain started," see, here's the thing. That boat was built with the door open. Mm-hmm. And that was a big boat. So that had to be a big door. So when the rain started, when everything was ready, God closed the door. Noah didn't close the door. God closed it.
It's like, you often hear that in our lives that we have points where we think God is acting on this and that. You know, I would like to have confirmation at some point that God is actually here. He's working this. Mm-hmm. He's doing this. God closed the boat.
Well, here's the thing. You know, it's funny that you say that, because they all entered the boat in pairs, male and female, and all of the people that God had commanded Noah to take, just as God commanded Noah, after 7 days. So they were on this boat for 7 days with no rain, no flood, no waters erupting from the earth, just sitting in there with the door shut up. And then it says after 7 days, the waters of the flood came and covered the earth. So can you imagine they were sitting on this boat thinking, where's the rain?
You.
Where's the hello?
Hey God, it's me. Hello.
Yeah, you forecast some rain down here? Not getting anything.
No.
Have you ever been in a time like that where you knew that God was calling you to do something?
Yes. All the time. I get that all the time. And I'm like, hello? Are you here? Are we doing this? We still doing this?
Are we supposed to be doing this? And then it takes one small thing. Whether it's the excitement you feel when you're doing it, whether it's a person making a comment, somebody watching a video, anything. It takes one thing. And then you're totally rejuvenated and your faith is made alive again.
Yeah.
Can you imagine those 7 days?
7 days? I can't even imagine that.
I can't either. Poor Noah. So when Noah was 600 years old, the waters erupted from the earth. And that's when the flood started. 600 years old.
600.
So, the rain fell. Again, one of the more familiar parts of the story. The rain fell for 40 days and 40 nights. Mm-hmm. And Noah and his wife and his sons and their wives and the boats, or the animals of every kind, 2 by 2 in pairs.
And then they had 7 of every clean animal and some for feeding purposes and all that. And the rains came up and the floods came down. Oh, wait, no, I was backwards.
The rains came down and the floods came up.
There we go, that's right.
The rains came up and the floods came down.
Yeah. And it covered the entire earth.
Yes.
And I'm getting a picture God from the very beginning didn't want this to happen.
Right.
Like we said in the very beginning, and we can't take away from that. It was a tragic moment for all of humanity. At this point, Jesus said there were people who were being given in marriage. He had weddings and all that, but the amount of stuff now that I'm seeing, the amount of ways God is able to achieve in the entire world, I think, as sad as it is, it was worth it in the end. Because I can't imagine what it would have been like had that sin corrupted the entire world at that point.
Right.
What the world would be like right now.
Yeah, it's bad enough now.
Yeah.
I can't even fathom.
So, terrible as it is, there was a greater purpose in mind.
Right.
And the fact that he saved just one person and one family, I think would have been more than enough.
You know, and I think it's really important because, you know, like we said, God closed the door behind them. And I think it's really important to note in verse 18 of chapter 7, it says, as the waters rose higher and higher above the ground, the boat floated safely on the surface. And I'm just going to stop for just a second and say, you know, I don't know what you're going through today. I have no idea if anybody's even watching at this moment, but I know that people go through things. And I don't know what you're going through. I don't know what motivated you to tune into our video, but I'm going to tell you, God will keep you floating safely on the surface. I don't know what your flood is, but I know that there are floods in our lives, and I know with everything in me that our God will keep you floating safely on the surface of your flood every day. Just trust Him one more day. Trust Him one more. Anything else we need to add?
If I do, I'll probably list it on the Facebook page later on. So we have a Facebook page. You can go ahead and like and follow that. We have a YouTube page. You can go ahead and try and subscribe to that. And please on our Facebook page to comment there. And on our podcasts from Spotify, you can listen there to the audio source later today or tonight. And I think that's really all about it is. Thank you so much for being here.
And let us know what you think.